Shabbat Shalom, Parashat Pinhas. The parasha of zealotry. Its power and dangers. Pinhas represents the ultimate zealot. A zealot that was able to stand up on behalf of his people at a moment of crisis in which no one else had the courage to do anything and take action. He knew all too well by taking this action that he might be endangering his own life. He knew all too well that it might mean that he will never ever be able to fulfill his destiny as a Kohen. He knew that what he was about to do may not be accepted. Of course, he ran first to the leadership to check. He went to ask Moshe and Aaron, is it not true that in this circumstance, when one violates such a basic principle of morality, if someone is having intimate relations in public with a non-Jew, is it not true that zealots have to take action to harm him? And Moshe Rabbeinu says, indeed, you are right. The halakha stands by you, but if you are the one that quotes the halakha, you are the one that has to carry it out. And Pinhas, without hesitation, moves forward and does what needs to be done. And God rewards him in kind with a covenant of peace. And not only does his priesthood not get affected, but rather he is guaranteed priesthood for all generations to be left within his family. Nonetheless, Chazal are very uneasy with this particular story. They are uneasy because of the ramifications in which people will decide to take on zealot actions. And when you read through the Gemara trying to analyze under what conditions in particular is one allowed to be a zealot, you reach the inevitable conclusion that it is almost impossible for a person to fulfill the halachic requirements for zealotry. Once I saw a great phrase, scribbled actually on graffiti, on the door of a bathroom stall of all places. But it was a sentence of great wisdom. It said as follows, beware of the zealots of all religions, for it is their fear that runs deeper than their convictions. What a powerful statement. Indeed, we do need to be careful from zealots, because zealots inevitably are motivated primarily either by fear or by self-interests. It is almost impossible to find a zealot that is truly motivated purely by only convictions, and that his convictions are pure and guided by God's commandments. Oh, we find many zealots in our generation. It has become all too popular in the name of zealotry to blow up people in malls, to drop bombs aimlessly on innocent civilians, to terrorize an entire world in the name of zealotry. And yes, even within our own ranks, we have seen the devastating consequence of religious zealotry that leads to tearing apart our people, disenfranchise those people that most need our closeness and guidance. Because all of these zealots are primarily guided with fear. With fear that if they don't stand up and do something, everything will fall apart around them. They are not zealots because they are truly acting in the name of God. They are acting in their own name, with their own desire. We saw several parashat ago another group of zealots that also had a pure heart, that really wanted to do things, wanted to take action as a result of the devastating consequence of being punished to wander around the desert for so many years. They so desperately wanted to be able to enter the Holy Land, to fulfill God's commandment, that they stood up and said to Moshe, here we are going to ascend the mountain, we are going to fight. They were zealots. They wanted to do it with all their hearts. Yet Moshe Rabbeinu said to them, you cannot be a zealot just because you decided to do so. God already spoke. God said no, and He is not amongst you. But the zealotry already got them carried away, and they could not stop themselves. Curiously, Rabbi Akiva tries to introduce to us a personality that is left mysterious in Chumash. A man by the name of Tzlofchad, who Rabbi Akiva tries to attribute to be the man who right after this great episode went gathering wood stubs throughout the forest on Shabbat and wound up being stoned to death. Rabbi Yehuda ben Betera, in a strong rebuke of Rabbi Akiva, argues that this is not true. That in fact Tzlofchad was killed because he is one of the people that tried to ascend the mountain. We often misunderstand the consequence of their behavior. Yes, it was devastating to them. They were brutally eliminated by the Amalekites and the Canaanites that came down the mountain. But nonetheless, they stood up with a commitment and conviction to the land of Israel, with a claim for the land. And in fact, immediately after that, the Torah tells us that Hashem commanded Moshe to tell the people, while they're in the desert, that when they come to the land that is called Eretz Moshvoteichem, the land of your settlement, no longer called Eretz Canaan, because indeed they merited to have the land named after them. And here at the end of our Parsha, we see that sometimes generations pass and the young generation can reflect back at the parents' behavior, and as misguided as it may have been, the pure-heartedness of Tzlofchad has definitely transmitted down to his daughters, as his 5 daughters stand up with great courage and say to Moshe Rabbeinu, our father died in the desert because of his actions. But we should not be left out of the divvying up of the land of Israel, because we too desire to have a portion of the land. And in fact, they commit themselves to marrying only within the family in order to sustain the ancestral inheritance, to be able to leave the land that they are given within the family. The great daughters of Tzlofchad, 5 righteous daughters, each and every one of them, by their own right, mentioned by name by God, merited to own a piece of land in Israel, because they understood that at the end of the day, it is the rule of God that is supposed to govern our lives. And zealotry of all forms is a very, very dangerous thing. If we were true zealots in the name of God, then we would know that at the end of the day, all we really need to do is follow His commandments. That is all the zealotry that is required. If we were true zealots, then perhaps all of us would be living on the right side of the ocean, striving to maintain our own little piece of land in the Holy Land. That is zealotry that is worthwhile. That is zealotry that one should turn onto his own self in their desire to come home and settle the land. Shabbat Shalom.